Hello, Ben.
Shalom, Chezi. How are you doing?
Good. The reason I ran off, my niece had a baby, so
That's awesome.
I was just texting my brother, congratulating for becoming a grandfather.
Pretty cool.
My older sister is she's been a grandmother twice already now, and now my brother is joining the group,
the club.
Exactly, joining the club. How are you doing, sir?
Pretty good. Yeah, I'm doing well. My brother actually had a daughter.
Awesome.
Last week.
That's the kind of stuff we need. That's the kind of news we need these days.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very nice.
Yeah, very unfortunate news today, of course. But we must move on. By the way, can I just ask you, how has this been so far, this Rambam one, compared to, let's say, the Pirkei
Avot? It's different. Definitely different. I mean, I think. Let's think. I think it definitely requires more. It's harder to maybe bring into your life a little bit harder, but I mean, I think we started also the way that when we were doing Pirkei Avot, I was more available to it. Now it's a little less so. So I have a little less time to contemplate it, but it's actually still helpful. I'm remembering now, using our conversation and other conversation or thinking about it and going into free will. It's definitely been seeping into other learning and conversations that I had. And that's the kind of experience that I'm looking forward to, and where I know when something is interesting and insightful, it's when it does that.
Well, specifically with the Shemona Prakim, right? Like, sort of the things that seem, I guess, like hard to connect to our day-to-day life. We're already interpreting this through Pirkei Avot, right? So ultimately, everything we're learning over here is then manifest in Pirkei Avot, which is a lot more broken down into like sort of your day-to-day life, right? Then it's great, like, don't do this, don't do that. And these are all built on, well, at least according to the Rambam, they're built on these assumptions, right? According to his deduction. All right. Let's get cracking. I sent the summary to you from wrapping up chapter 2, and we started chapter 3. So we'll go through it quickly. I will finish chapter 3 today, I hope, and then we'll go on to chapter 4. Chapter 4 is a doozy, though. We'll probably do it over a few weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Do you want to cover chapter 2?
Yeah, I want to. I'm actually interested. I want to see where they make stuff up here. So
okay. Let's see. So recap of chapter 2 before we go into chapter 3. First thing is intellectual and moral virtues in the Rambam's philosophy. So this is a summary.
I'll just correct. This is we are doing a summary of where we got to in chapter 2 last week. Like chapter 2, we already started the week before. We continued chapter 2 and then went on to chapter 3.
Right. Okay, so an overview of the virtues. There are 2 types, according to the Rambam. There's moral virtues, and then there are intellectual virtues. The moral virtues related to emotions and actions developed through refining one's character, and the intellectual ones are related to intellect, rational, and developed through learning and understanding. So if we talk about the intellectual virtues, we have chokhmah, wisdom, understanding the causes, both near and distant of something. And this involves a comprehensive grasp of the 4 Aristotelian causes, which we discussed, right? Material cause, which is the substance from which something is made of. Let's say wood for a chair, that's what it's made of. And then formal cause, the shape of the structure, 4 legs and a seat for a chair. Efficient cause, the agent or process that creates or formed that object. So in this case, the carpenter. And then the final cause, it is the purpose or reason for the item's existence. So if it's a chair, it's to sit on, to chill.
Right.
Okay. So the Greeks and Chazal, different how the emphasis they put. The Greeks put an emphasis on the efficient cause.
Right. Who am I? Who's the guy? The character.
Mm-hmm. While Chazal, the Jewish sages, highlight the final cause, God's intentional purpose. Like, what is this made of?
Right. According to the Greeks, sure, God exists, but that's sort of, the world exists because there's a creator, right? And that's why that's intentional. And as far as Jews are concerned, like, first of all, obviously, yes, the world exists because there's a creator, but because there's a creator, there's a purpose for creation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And this also helps us make decisions on what is the purpose of things and how they should.
We also spoke about, I don't know if it's here, we spoke about how in Judaism, we also have even the word, the name, right? Lashem, Lashema.
Right.
What is it for?
Yeah. I've never thought about it before. The things you don't really think about, because it's right there. It's Lashem, but you don't really think about it. So I appreciate that.
Go on.
For Jews, names reflect purpose. So this is kind of what the Chezi was alluding to, even in the name that we use. The etymology connects to that. And this is like the divine name representing the purpose of God.
Oh, he does mention it over here. Okay, awesome, cool, great.
Mm-hmm. And the second,
virtue, like the tetragrammaton, right? Which we believe that, like, ultimately in it, it's like, everything manifests through that because that is the purpose of all things. And of course, God's name would also hold in it the purpose of all things.
Right. So the second thing is sechel, the intellect. And this one is divided to first principles, the axioms, the basic inherent truths, such as self-awareness, I am alive, and the sechel nikna, the acquired intellect, the knowledge that you gain through learning and experience.
Right.
Cool. Okay. And then the third thing is chut atvuna v'tov avana. So the clarity and quality of our understanding, to the ability to grasp concepts quickly and thoroughly.
Right. And in order to fully understand something, you have to go really through all these stages, right? You have to obviously be a cognizant person. You got to be the eye. You have to take on this chachma and understand your purpose. You have to understand it to, like, its very core, to really understand how to deal with that, to better understand how to discern and what next to do. You really have to understand something to its core.
Right. So, and I guess, the reason that that the Rambam goes into this, like this, I guess he's talking about how to really improve yourself, and here specifically how to improve your intellect, yourself, in terms of your intellect, which is also ties into what Pirkei Avot is about, which is refining and understanding our.
Mm-hmm. Ultimately, right, the goal being ultimately to connect to the divine intellect, which we said,
right,
I don't know if 2 times ago, which is, again, that's like sort of like a very distant imprint of sort of what God's intellect is, right? We have like this small little version of that, and we're trying to get back to there.
Mm-hmm. Right. So how to integrate these intellectual virtues, or how they integrate? They form, we can think about it as just 3 elements: chokhmah, sechel, v'zachut, zakut atvuna.
Here it's chut atvuna, where let's say chokhmah, sechel, tvuna, whatever, sure.
Right. And that forms the concept that we bring from another place. The Rambam wouldn't necessarily, maybe we'll recognize it, but he definitely doesn't mention it, of Chabad. Chokhmah bin Adat, wisdom.
Right, the acronym Chabad. There's also a movement called Chabad that bases a lot of its teaching, its Hasidic teaching, on the mystical understandings as well, which will obviously create like a synthesis and integrate these different concepts together.
Mm-hmm. And then we did note a few differences between the genders. Traditionally, we say women are said to have more bina. So you have double the amount of bina, which kind of correspond to intuition, emotional sensitivity, understanding, while men are more intellectual.
It's not really. It's not really. Intellectual is the wrong word over here.
Yeah.
There's an ability to act, right, to discern and then make a decision, which because I'm shielded from my emotional investment, I can make a decision, right? We gave an example, I believe it was nashim daten kalot, right? Which is like women are with regards to their dot, right? They're seemingly they're lacking. And it doesn't mean that like exactly. It sounds like it's saying that they're uneducated or not smart. We're not saying that at all. We're saying that they're lacking in this certain sense. And of course, that's why we need both of us, right? I hear it says we need this complementary dynamic where both are needed for a balance, right? We said like a processing.
Yeah, because I mean, you need to be able to separate yourself from, let's say, for emotions, so you can make a rational decisions. But you also need to integrate your emotions into whatever behavior you're going to have, because you can't just be.
And if you're in tune with your emotions, you'll be more in tune and more intuitive to other people's emotions. Like I'm saying, that's why, there's a sense where like sometimes the man is an idiot, right? Quote unquote, like the way Hollywood shows it. Like, really all that was happening in the room, and your wife's like, yeah, you didn't see like what was happening underneath. And the guy's like, no, I couldn't see what was going on. Like, it's the classic example of, the wife coming to you and said like, oh, Shelly was being horrible to me. She wasn't being nice. You're like, oh, don't be friends with her anymore. And that's not the answer I'm looking for. I'm looking for like, no, there's a much bigger thing. And the guy's like, well, I have a solution for this right now. Like, we won't be stuck here anymore.
And also a classic example, and this happened to me multiple times, but of like, we would, like my wife and I maybe would have a conversation with some people, and then we would go out, and she would be like, did you notice that so-and-so was acting differently, or they seem like they're a little depressed? And I'm like, what? I didn't see, like I did. Yeah. So that intuiting the emotions of other people, sometimes that's also
right. But that could be that could cloud the mind, right? There's so much data out there that I'm having a hard time identifying the signal, right? And then there's personally, like, I realize that I realize the signal, but now I connect myself to that signal too much, right? Like I'm also emotional about this, and that also, I'm actually surprised that like the AI translated this, right? Like it's not PC. So
yeah. Okay, so going into the moral virtues, we were talking about intellectual virtues. Now we're going into moral virtues. Those are developed within the emotional realm and guided by the senses. Examples here include caution, fear of sin, generosity, humility, contentment. And we spoke about how this is reflected in the saying in Pirkei Avot, who is rich, the one who is content with his portion, courage, faith. And then the Rambam emphasizes balance in moral virtues. Unlike the pursuit of intellectual virtues, when one should strive continually for greater understanding, the moral virtues, you need to balance yourself within a spectrum.
That is Maimonides, like his what he's famous for. I mean, there's other people that mentioned it beforehand, and like Aristotle and Confucius, but like as far as like the middle of the road, right?
Yeah.
Now, because he mentions, there's a sense where like, no, at some places you want to go to the extreme, right? Like as far as the intellect. So this brings up the question of, it doesn't transition it over here nicely. This brings up the question of evil, right? Like, isn't evil like in an extreme? The question would be, it's not written over here. The question would be like, well, when I see evil, don't I run all the way to the other side, right? Because that's an extreme. I want to stay away from that. But even when I run all the way to the other side, evil still exists, right? Like, you could be living wherever you want. Hamas didn't disappear just because you decided to run to the other way, right? So like, we have to.
It's a great lesson, because if we think, if you think about it politically, like in a vague way, right? You have two parties, you have two sides, and you think, the other side. It could be possible that both sides have their own kind of evil or imbalance, the way they were going to refer to it, right? And it's important to know, because it's not like you can run to the other side and then you're completely safe. You also need to understand that even there is a form of imbalance that we might call evil. And I mean, I guess an example of this, just to probably to strengthen this in terms of the middle of the road, right? I think There is humility. Humility is you could say that's humility is between being self-effacing or shvelut. I don't know how low. I don't know how you would translate that.
Not self-loathing, but that's not really self-loathing. That's hating. Shvelut would be what would shvelut be? Okay, you can
Right.
keep on talking. I'll check
Right.
it
So
out.
humility has there's two extreme in that spectrum. It's in the middle road between shvelut, which Chezi will translate for us, and gava, or
Hubris.
hubris, right? And so being humble doesn't mean that you're self-effacing, or that you're self-loathing, or that you say, "Oh, I don't have any skills. I don't." Right? That's not being humble.
Self-degradation.
Degradation, right? Yes. So the middle road is that in there is humility, and I think Rambam goes through it. I mean, we're going to go through it specifically, so there's going to be a lot of examples. Okay. So just to continue forward, the nature of evil. So we talked about this. So where evil can be construed as really an incomplete or unbalanced form of good, lacking the harmony that defines complete goodness.
Right. So like murder, bad. Murder for saving a child, good. Like I'm saying, the act itself, if oriented properly, is now no longer evil, right? It's how it's being in the context, how it's being done, how it's being oriented.
Right. So not an independent force, but a deficiency or lack of reality, or
lack of reality.
I don't know.
I'm not remembering exactly if we had another note about this, but this would be more as far as like the tzimtzum concept of like there's a retraction from God, which leaves space. In that space, then because there's room for this to happen, basically. But even in that lack of space is still ultimately made out of God as well. The way we experience God in the lack of space, if unbalanced, we call evil.
Okay. Yeah. And then we go into imaginal and physiological parts. These aspects do not fall under virtues or deficiencies. They either function correctly or not. So we talked about digestion as an example. This is you can't cultivate through effort. They are natural capabilities. I guess you might be able to influence proxies that could influence that, but not it specifically, I guess. I don't know. Maybe.
I also, I mean, the Rambam talks about over here about like, if you're born with like a crappy imagination, even if like he says over here in the end, even if like you do everything, you still won't be able to prophesize because you need this. But I wonder, like, today there could be a man with like a crappy imagination and he takes some psychedelics and then he's like, now he has like a crazy imagination. Like I would wonder, like, is there?
It would still, I feel like it would still be comparative though, compared to another person that's on like on a higher level. That person might go up, but it will still be from the place that he started from.
That's true, but let's. I mean, you hear people say like, I would never have imagined, right? And someone sees something, and from that point on, now that changes their worldview. Now, I would agree with that. Let's say you could argue. You could argue someone with like an extreme case, like right, he can't imagine. It's just hard for me to think of the Rambam. I mean, it's classic Rambam. It's hard for me to like, people are left outside basically.
Yeah.
Okay, chapter 3.
Chapter 3. So we went through this pretty fast, or we'll be able to go through it again.
Yep.
Healthy and it talks about. It starts by saying that there are people say that there is something as an unhealthy body versus a healthy body. So we can apply the same. Rambam says we can apply the same to the nefesh. And the main idea here is if a healthy nefesh consistently acts with good traits and behavior, while an unhealthy nefesh consistently acts with bad traits and behaviors, right? So what we talked about in chapter 2 relate to here.
I think the second point is also good, that the physical health and illness are studied by medicine, right? While spiritual health is studied by examining traits and actions, ultimately, right? Like I need to see, I can't, my barometer, right, is not if you have temperature or not. It's really, I'm going to see how you're behaving, how you're acting.
Yeah. So a healthy nefesh, another way to think about it is that the Rambam mentions is one whose traits lead them naturally to good and appropriate action is one with a healthy nefesh. One with an unhealthy nefesh is one that has traits that lead to bad and appropriate actions. And often, and I remember this point we also made, they're not even aware of their negative nature, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally.
Right.
Misinterpreting, right? It could be a misinterpretation or both of moral values, but it can also be just intention.
Wait, what was that? Scroll back up for a second. What was that over there? Comparison physical, just like the body can misrepresent taste. Seeing some are bitter and sweet, and unhealthy nefesh can represent moral values. Okay, right, exactly. I could be diluted into not diluted. I could be
diluted.
Diluted, exactly. I'm like diluted. I'm like, I know it sounds similar. I could be diluted thinking that the wrong thing I'm doing is actually the right thing, like you said, without even like a malicious intent.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Misaligned perceptions. Right. So this is kind of hitting on the same point that we discussed. People with an unhealthy nefesh can convince themselves that harmful behaviors are beneficial.
Right, I would say that, right. So an extreme would be like, I'll keep on drinking alcohol, even though I know it's horrible for me, right? An alcoholic. I can't control myself anymore. Or more that would be like an ego, right? Unchecked ego. I think I know my way is the highway. And I'm not listening to anyone. And then I find myself in a complete skewed world.
Right. And then you gave an extreme example of and used Game of Thrones as a reference. So the Rambam doesn't mention Game of Thrones.
Right, I'm glad it also doesn't say classic example, right? Extreme example of misaligned values.
Right. Yeah. So right. So
Rambam talks about Game of Thrones, of course.
Yeah. And Rabbi Cook agrees with him about Game of Thrones.
Right.
But here we mentioned how they view their relationship, Cersei and Jaime. They're in an incestuous relationship, and they view the relationship as a loving relationship. Right? It's beautiful for them, so it looks good. But society recognizes
specifically in that show, exactly, like society. I mean, that creates a lot of instability because of that, right? Like they can't, like their father can't get things done because he has to be dealing and working around that.
Right.
We mentioned that the Rambam does note, he doesn't give the example of Cersei and Jaime. He does talk about how controlling strong life-rooted impulses like incest are extremely difficult, like one of the most difficult things to control. And Rabbi Cook, no, it was like Rabbi Cook agrees comparing it to using an atomic power. That's not true. We gave the example of the atomic power. Rav Cook was not aware of atomic power at the time. But the attitude is like, obviously it could be extremely beneficial, right, to humankind. It could also be extremely destructive, like it was in Chernobyl.
Right. I just mentioned Rabbi Cook agrees.
Rabbi Cook agrees. With what? With all.
And then the final point, I think, is also a very important point. Misaligned values are a symptom, and they're not the root problem.
Right.
Or, I mean, this one specifically, one needs an external standard to assess and correct moral judgments.
Right. So this is what we're going to get into now, right? Like the source of the value.
Right.
Do you want to open up the actual text?
I can. I definitely can. Let's see if I prepared it well. I did not. Okay, so I just need to open this. Take a second. 8 chapters. And now we're good.
Okay. So we stopped off. We were reading through Ukmo Shecholei Haguf Yidmu, and
just a second. Safari is giving us some sure. This is 4.
Oh yeah. Exactly. Perfect. No, that okay. we're about to say, yeah, exactly here. So we're still basically here in this issue, right? Like them thinking that they're doing something bad, they're still thinking that it's something good, right? So where we just ended sort of leads into this question, which is what's the source of the value hierarchy ultimately, right? Like we're coming act this way, don't act this way, you're considered sick, right? So Rambam actually doesn't address this directly here, what the source is. And you could obviously say that they're skeptics, right? People that are considered sick, right? I'm sure they're going to be very offended. They're going to be like, who gave the rabbis the authority to decide what the value hierarchy is?
That's eventually where a lot of discussions lead, right? I mean, and that's the where are you standing question kind of ties into it, right? Yeah, I mean, I think
that is okay. So that exactly, where are you standing? So,
yeah.
Right. So we really have we alluded to this also last week. We have our morals versus our desires, or the way Kierkegaard calls it, the aesthetics, right? So should we follow the objective morals, or do we desire or follow our desires, which are called the aesthetics, the things that look nice, the things that make us feel good? What are we deciding? What is higher on the hierarchy value? And we mentioned also how we could see this issue in postmodernism, or let's say the woke ideology, where all narratives are equal, right? And no behavior really could be judged, even if it's an extreme one, like a cannibal, right? Eating his neighbor, because who are we to judge? We have to understand. Jordan Peterson spoke about this once and gave an example of, yes, if there's a fire in the theater, there's many different ways I could go outside the theater, right? And there are many different narratives. The smartest move is going to be to run out quickly, right? I could also decide to sing a song and close my eyes and run in circles, right? That's also a fair narrative. You'll just probably be burnt that way. So just saying it's all okay, obviously, again, that leads us to some of these issues. I mean, this was 1,000 years ago. He's not the first one to ask this problem, to mention this problem, but it has been exacerbated, I think, also with postmodernism specifically, right?
I mean, I'll just steal man a little bit, because
please.
We could say that going out of a burning theater, I don't need Judaism to tell me where to go. I understand I need to get away from the fire.
Sure, that's fine. You don't need Judaism right now. I'm just saying, as far as picking, there's a smarter path to pick. Not all narratives are the same.
Yeah, but then there are other considerations as well, and especially we'll see there are effects societally, individually, that you need to take into account, and being able to make those calculations on a daily basis is something that every individual needs to have, which is why we also stand on the shoulders of giants.
We stand on the shoulders of the giants. Well, speaking of giants, right? So, I mean, you could even see this playing out I mentioned this in the past, in the Greek myth, right? So you have what's the word in English? The Libris, right? Where you have the Minotaur, right? And Icarus is stuck inside. And the Libris in Greek times, that really symbolizes the natural world, right? And it's a closed system, and there's no clear escape. I don't know how to get out of this thing, right? And that is the fact that it's a maze, that's really representing the confusion of values, right? So the Minotaur is the Minotaur within, in a certain sense, that really represents the human animalistic evil inclination, right? There's a part of me that's a man, and there's a part of me that's an animal, and I don't know how to deal with that. And it's almost the evil inclination. It's overpowering me. It's going to consume me, right? So now continuing with this analogy, attempting to navigate the Libris, right, without, and like you just said, where are you standing? If there isn't an external guide, right, this leaves me really disoriented between, again, my animalistic primal desires and the morals, or the moral values that I have. So then the Greeks introduce, in this beautiful idea, they introduce the wings, right, by his father, like Neil Dedalus. Neil, that's his nickname, is Dedalus, so I'm just mentioning that way. And so the wings represent the human intellect, right, which is ultimately, it is really attempting to lift them above the maze of moral uncertainty, right? If I could build these wings, I could do it. And The problem is, as we all know how the story ends, that the Greek really thought that through intellect, right, I could ultimately establish an objective criteria of morality, right, which is what we would call flying too close to the sun, or trying to see what's behind the sun, right? What's the reason for all these things? Now, his father doesn't fly too high, right? He warns him, but he's doing this because of his tradition, right? I know the people that came before me, and we already know that we can't see what's behind the sun, right? So it doesn't work out. Now, obviously, it's tragic, or tragedy really is when humans are faced with the inevitable, right? Like this, and it's sort of tragic for humans at the time, right? So he flies too close, he can't make it down, and this is really he's facing like an absolute truth. And ultimately, his wings, which are his own creation, well, his dad's creation, but a human creation, they fail, right? Because they lack an objective foundation, right? Like there's nothing I could do with this. I would say this would be the Greek version of how to deal with this. Obviously, now there's a Jewish perspective to these things. There's also a Greek. There's also a myth, not myth, a maze example that the Ramchal gives, but. In Judaism, just looking at the wing concept, right? The Torah tells us that God will bring us forth on wings of eagles, right, out of Egypt, right? And in that sense, the wings symbolize like a divine guidance, right? Like unlike Icarus, where it's self-made, right? God really is giving us these wings. He's offering us these wings, and he's, which again is in this case is representing intellect and again like moral insight. But it also, he says, I'm going to bring you to me. So it allows us also to go as high as we need to, basically, as high as necessary for you to reach me.
Right. The Tanya talks about it too.
Right. The Tanya or the Kabbalah will definitely talk about, you'll correct, I think I'm right about this. They don't talk about the wings. They talk about the eagle. The eagle represents repentance. In a certain sense, tshuva is a constantly, we realize we're in an imperfect world, and God is asking us to participate with him. We've given this example before with Prometheus, right? Like the Greek story of fire is Prometheus has to steal fire from the gods and give it to humans.
Yeah.
Right. In our tradition, Adam starts bugging out when the day's ending, right? He feels like it's all over. God gifts him 2 stones and tells him, rub them together and you'll create fire. But that's because he's looking for a partner in creation, right? And it's a gift to us. So same thing here with the wings. It's a gift that we're getting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think all that makes sense. I think. So where were we? The wings. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
What?
Do you want to start reading, going through it?
I'm still thinking about the things we were reading beforehand that like, this really goes back to Revelation, which because I'm trying to again set our hierarchy values over here because ultimately, it's our perspective. We acknowledge tradition, right? So I'm giving kudos to Icarus's father from saying like, listen, this is not what the wise men do, right? He didn't fly too high, and that allowed him to stay safe. Or you've heard this term Chesterton's fence, I'm sure, or not,
yes,
right? So like, that does make sense. That does provide stability, being like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But that's not a complete solution for identifying values, right? Don't change what's not broken doesn't mean I can identify the values right now. It just means there are some values that seem to be working, and that could be for many different reasons. Ultimately, this goes back to revelation, right? We need revelation to fully grasp the moral framework. And this is why it's going back to the concept of the maze, right? I need to be able to see something, identify something outside the maze, right? So I would mention that Ramchal has an interpretation of the maze. He talks about like the classic mazes that were around him when he was living in Europe. I'm sure you've seen these beautiful curated mazes that like right as people go through. And in the middle, there's this tall tower, right? And the central platform where traditionally you would stand above, if you would get lost, you would raise your hand and the guy would tell you, walk left, walk right, and then you'll be able to go outside. So this, in a certain sense, is the prophet through God getting that information from above and letting you know, take a left, take a right, right? So we have an exterior perspective looking at these things. So like, and now we'll go into the next part. Rambam doesn't actually delve into the origins of the hierarchy value, right? This was just like me talking about things that I mean, obviously our sages talk about this, but things that I've studied. Rambam doesn't address this directly. He more
talks about it. I'm just reading the Kuzari, so just going.
Sorry, what are you saying?
In my other Chavruta that shall not be named, I'm going through the Kuzari now.
With Jacob?
No, another one that should not be
Another
named.
one. We don't know. We don't know about this one. You're going through the Kuzari. Very cool. Very fun. Right. Okay. So I think
he talks about those things. I feel like
I mean, the Rambam basically goes back to like go get guidance from the rabbis.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of a cheat because it'll be like the rabbis also have the answers probably that we were mentioning right now. So you're gonna get it there anyways. Anyways, let's continue. Sorry for the.
All good. Mm-hmm. Okay. וכמו שהחולים כשידעו חלים ולא ידעו מלאכת הרפואות, ישאלו הרופאים ויודיעום מה שצריך לעשותו, ויזהירום ממה שידמוהו ערב, ויכריחום לקחת את הדברים הנמאסים אמרים עד שיבריאו גופותם, וישובו לבחור בטוב ולמאוס ברע. כן, חולי הנפשות צריך להם שישאלו חכמים, אשר הם רופאי הנפשות, ויזהירום מן הרעות ההם אשר יחשבו בהן שהן טובות, וירפאו אותם במלאכה, אשר ירפאו בה מידות הנפש, אשר הזכרה בפרק שאחר זה.
But this is not the end. Scroll down. Yeah, okay. Continue.
אמנם, חולי הנפשות אשר לא ירגישו בחלים וידמו בו שהוא בריאות, או ירגישו בו ולא יתרפו, אחריתם למה שיהיה אחרית החולה כשימשך אחר הנעותיו ולא יתרפא שהוא ימות בלא ספק. אבל המרגישים והם נמשכים אחר הנעותיהם, אמרה בהם התורה האמיתית מספרת דבריהם, כי בשרירות ליבי אלך וגומר, רוצה לומר שהוא יכווין לרבות צמאו, והוא יוסיף לעצמו צמא.
Let's stop there.
והוא יוסיף לעצמו צמא.
Okay. You want to read in English?
Yeah. Likewise, just as when people unacquainted with the science of medicine realize they are sick and consult a physician who tells them what they must do, forbidding them to partake of that which they imagine beneficial and prescribing for them things which are unpleasant and bitter in order that their bodies may become healthy and that they may again choose the good and spurn the bad. So those whose souls become ill should consult the sages, the moral physicians, who are the moral physicians, who will advise them against indulging in those evils which they, the morally ill, think are good, so that they may be healed by that art of which I shall speak in the next chapter, and through which the moral qualities are restored to their normal condition. But if he who is morally sick be not aware of his illness, imagining that he is well, or being aware of it does not seek a remedy, his end will be similar to that one who, suffering from bodily ailment, yet continuing to indulge himself, neglects to be cured, and who in consequence surely meets an untimely death. Those who know that they are in a diseased state, but nevertheless yield to their inordinate passions, are prescribed the truthful law, which quotes their own words, "Do I walk in the stubbornness of my heart, in order that the indulgence of my passions may appease the thirst for them." This means,
Oh no, this means that intending to quench his thirst, it is on the contrary, intensified. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, just a general comment. Rambam has done this a few times already, where you see he'll be like, "I'll talk about this in the next chapter," and then he's like, "Maybe we'll talk about it in the next chapter." So like he keeps on pushing it down the road. I think he's trying to sell his books. Next, you'll have to know next week.
Yeah, I'm selling chapter 1 now. I'll get chapter 2 if there's enough excitement.
And he's continuing like we saw earlier, like with this like analogy to like the sick body and the sick soul, right? So there's really like three different statuses of being spiritually ill or sick. He uses two different things over here, according to the Rambam. And again, this is particularly, again, we're talking about how it relates to one's midot, one's character traits. And okay, so we spoke about this, but we're just recapping again. There's the one that's the aware and active, right? So which is like would be a repentant person. So right. This person that he's talking about, he recognizes that he's spiritually unwell, and ideally he acknowledges his flaws, and he's taking the steps he needs to rectify this, right? So like Rambam says, if you're ill, you go to a physician and he gives you medicine. Here you're going to go to the rabbis that they're going to give you consulting, self-improvement. I would assume this also includes like good psychologists and things like that with regards to people that actually could tell you how to work on yourself, right? This is also true about assuming your psychologist is morally aligned. Hopefully, then many of the things that he thinks are moral would also align with Torah values as well, right? Then we have this, we'll call it the unaware passive route, right? Which is, let's say, someone that's sinning obliviously. Okay, the oblivious sinner. That's a better title. That's the name of my band, the Oblivious Sinner. Right. So this individual or this guy, he is spiritually ill, but he's not aware of that. Right. So because he's completely blind to that, he is, and this is like what we were talking about earlier. The guy that thinks that he's doing the right thing, he doesn't even know sort of how to ask for help because he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong, and that's why it's also very, very dangerous. And he's risking getting like stuck in this cycle of self-deception, right? He just kind of keep on tricking himself. And then lastly, we have the example of the one who is aware, but he's purposely inactive. I guess he decides that's the bad guy, right? The sinner, the sinner that's aware, right? So he's aware of his deficiencies, but he just refuses to change his ways ultimately. Right. So obviously that's very, very bad. That's like what we would call a quote unquote bad person. Mm-hmm. And this will clearly, like the Rambam is saying, this is like a rejection of growth. And it's like you're going to be stuck in like a moral stagnation. Right. You're going to ossify. You're not going to go anywhere because and worse, you're going to end up causing yourself harm.
Right. And this kind of calls out or is a callback to what we discussed before in terms of imbalance, like the person, the bad person that we just mentioned now is the one that's equated with, he's continuing to imbalance himself and his nefesh, his body, by continuing to bring in things that make it bad. Actually, there is one thing that I want to call out too.
Please.
That the Rambam is probably going to talk more, and you can tell me if he did this purposely. In English, I got it. He says here,
ill. You mean ill or sick?
Not ill, sick. What if he? No, it's on the second one. So he tells them, right? Yeah, this person eats. He tells them for the physician, right, or the sage tells them forbids them of taking things that they imagine beneficial, that are sweet. I guess arev is sweet, right? And he prescribes them the opposite, right? Things that are unpleasant and bitter.
I want to keep on smoking. No, you should go jogging.
Right. So the Rambam is going to talk about how, and in this you can think if it's actually also if it works or not, but how like sometimes when you're at one end, you don't need to just go to the middle. You need to go to the extreme other end for a second, and then
correct. So I'm saying it's a pendulum swim to be able to get that balance back. But sometimes
I think he was mentioning that here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to point out, just specifically because he's very about being in the middle. That's the ideal. If you've fallen very far, right, sometimes you're going to have to jump ahead to be able to make your way back. Right. So yeah, I think that's a very good point. Thank you for mentioning that. Let's just for a second though, just because these things are intense, Rambam is, again, he's telling us that there's severe consequences to these things. The way he's talking about over here, they're going to bring your untimely death. So that's obviously scary. And we also know, of course, that there's some evil people out there that died at, 100 years old, right? Like there's some Nazi out there that was hiding. Well, not anymore. But like I'm saying, there's people that managed to quote unquote avoid this, right? So they didn't get their timely death. And like, if I don't take my medicine, his attitude is just like I don't take my medicine, I'll get sick. If I don't take care of my nefesh and my soul, I'll also get sick. So this is a good place to mention. It's in Brachot, Tractate Brachot, Talmud. I don't remember exactly which page, but you might have heard this in the past about the wicked in their lives are considered dead. Right?
Mhm.
So this is really suggesting that people who live without any real moral direction, and they're not being repentant, obviously they're physically alive. However, spiritually they're considered dead. They're not considered here anymore. And this has to do with some of your Tanya, but Rav Nachman, which is very far from Rambam, but he always comes out against old people, right? He's all about rejuvenation, renewing, redoing constantly, right? So like he's very against the idea of if you're old and if you're stuck in your ways, you're considered dead in a certain sense. Like you've ossified and like you don't want to be there. You always want to be able to change and grow. But again, this person is considered dead. Obviously, conversely, the righteous person, we also have a saying that says that that the righteous, even though they're dead, they're considered alive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's the exact opposite over here. There's even a crazier saying, which is this saying, Kol omer davar b'shem amro mavi gula la'olam, right? If I mention something if I quoting someone else and I mention him by name, I bring redemption to the world. But if a rabbi that gets quoted, I'm trying to translate in my head, a rabbi that gets quoted in the grave, his lips are moving. Right now, we don't mean like his literal lips are moving, but we mean that his spirit, his concept, his ideas, those who want to follow on his path, they are ultimately creating a live spirit, right? So even though he's not with us, he's alive, and vice versa. Even though I'm alive, I could be considered dead. Just on this note, since in a space sometimes we talk about resurrection, from a Jewish perspective, who says this? I'm forgetting the quote. Maybe it's not the Mahar. 1 second. I just want to write this down so I could look this up. There is in the Talmud, it's known that it says the sages would go and resurrect the dead, right? So now what does that mean? You could take an attitude that no, that means they were resurrecting the dead. And then in that case, how novel is Jesus at that point? But thinking about what we just did right now, taking an evil person who's considered dead, assisting him in repentance, turning him into a righteous person, he is then considered alive, right? So spiritually, they were resurrecting the dead.
Yeah.
Now you could take a literal understanding, but I'm just saying in the context of what we're talking about over here, you see it's a spiritual metaphor over here. Like they were resurrecting the dead by going out, meeting people, and allowing them to quote unquote be born again.
Right.
Let's continue.
Yeah. Were we at the end of the?
No, ach al sheinam. I think. Ach.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we stopped at the middle. Ach al sheinam.
Did we do that? No, it's Mobu Yosef L'Tzama. Yeah. Ach al sheinam. Yeah.
Ach al sheinam margishim dvar shlema הרבה אמר.
ach al sheinam margishim dvar Shlomo. Solomon.
דבר שלמה הרבה אמר, דרך אוויל ישר בעיניו, ושומע לעצה החכם.
This is in Proverbs.
רוצה לומר, שומע לעצת החכם חכם, מפני שהוא יודיעהו הדרך שהוא ישר באמת, לא אשר יחשבהו הוא ישר. ואמר יש דרך ישר לפני איש, ואחריתה דרכי מוות, ואמר בחולי הנפשות האלה בהיותם בלתי יודעים מה יזיקם, מה יועילם, דרך הרשעים כאפלה, לא ידעו במה ייכשלו, אך מלאכת רפואת הנפשות היא כמו שספר בזה הפרק.
Nice, classic Rambam.
Okay, let's see.
I mean, again, just looking at these verses, Solomon was an OG.
Yeah. So in English, this means that intending to quench the thirst, it is on the contrary intensified. He who is ignorant of his illness is spoken of in many places by Solomon, for example, who says, the way of the fool is straight in his own eyes, but he who hearkeneth unto counsel is wise.
I always tell my wife, you need to hearken to this.
Yeah. This means that he who listens to the counsel of the sage is wise, for the sage teaches him the way that is actually right, and not the one that he, the morally ill, erroneously considers to be such. Solomon also says, there is many a way which seemeth even before a man, but it seemeth even before men, but its ends are ways unto death. Again, in regard to these who are morally ill, and that they do not know what is injurious from that which is beneficial, he says, the way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know against what they stumble. The art of healing the diseases of the soul will, however, form the subject matter of the 4th chapter, which is on sale now.
Can you scroll up for a second? I want to just see again how he translates yashar. That's sort of what I want to.
Again, in regard to these, that they don't know what is injurious. Where is yashar?
No. One of the quotes you see here, you have
the fool is straight in his own
ways. Okay. So, and he also says yashar be'emet, like truly straight or truly. Right. Again, straight over here is like sort of on the straight and narrow, which would be like truly true.
Yeah, and not the one that the morally ill erroneously considered to be such.
So basically what the Rambam is saying over here, that sometimes really we're sure that we're right? And it really takes us, you test it on the arena, right? People come to the TLC with a lot of great ideas, and then quickly they get shot down when they realize they're talking to someone with has done a little more reading, has a little more knowledge, and that we need that in our life, right? To realize where we go wrong. And when he says yashar over here, at least Rav Shirky always gave the example of the first Rashi of the Torah, which has a lot of things to discuss about the first Rashi. But one thing he has over there, he quotes Jeremiah about God giving the land to Kol HaYashar Be'enav, the one that God sees is straight in his eyes. And in a certain sense, we have to find what is this true? What is this truly true thing? So Jacob's not going to like this. I would say that you could say, according to this verse, the people that get the land are the people that are righteous or not righteous, who are on the straight and narrow according to God. Now I would argue that that's what 1948 looks like, right? People that eventually God gifts them this because they're acting properly. Definitely in this current climate, and I'm sure Jacob would say, show me this truth that you see in Israel. Chezi, show me this this straight and narrow, which is why the Rashi says be'enav, or Jeremiah says be'enav, in his eyes, right? We ultimately don't understand God's calculations. We don't understand his perspective of how he sees these things. However, even if we don't fully understand it, we still know that it's an ethical criteria that we're being told over here. So even though there's definitely wiggle room to understand, to better understand what it is that's being asked of us, we know that it's ethical. And again, I would argue that you sort of, I wouldn't argue this, our sages argue, you see God, you see the back of God, right? We see it in retrospect. And to start figuring out the calculations, whether we're worthy or not, is above our pay grade. But we hope that in his eyes, we're worthy. And on a personal note, I hope Israel, both the people and the nation, step up their game and make sure that we're worthy both in God's eyes and the world's eyes.
As should we all.
Yes, Bezrat, with the help of God. What time is it right now? 9:57. Okay, so let's not continue with 4. We'll continue next week.
Sounds good. Yeah.
And just again, I'm just confirming because I want to make sure it's not I find it beneficial to do that little recap in the beginning. I want to make sure that. Okay.
Yeah, great. It looked good for me. It seems like RJ liked it.
Oh, look at that! Fine recap, RJ. Can you scroll down this 4 for a second? I know I was saying I think it's a doozy, but I just want to see it for a moment.
Let's take a look. Yeah, we're talking about the middle, right?
Mhm.
Different examples.
I just remember being once depressed in class when we were going through this, and I'm like, I have like this like PTSD from chapter 4.
I like so too.
Oh no, it's still going. Oh, nice. More. I guess it makes sense. Rambam has been pushing everything off, right?
Yeah, he said everything will be in chapter 4. I don't know what's going to come after chapter 4.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, yeah, well, this will take.
Yeah, so this is definitely gonna over here or no? No, it's still not over. Okay, this will obviously be split up. Whoa.
Let's see. Let's now I'm curious. But yeah, we should go.
You know, how much does the Rambam actually have to say?
This is still 4.
It's still 4. Oh no. Yeah. Okay. So it is this one. I'm remembering that. Like I was like, it's going on and on and on. All right. Wow. Listen.
Okay, I guess we'll find the end. We'll find the end.
There's 5. Great. Okay. Well, I guess that's a good point. We got to the middle point. There's 8 chapters. We're in chapter 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I will see you later, sir.
Yes. I will go
Take
back
care.
over.
Be strong.
Thank you very much.
Have a great week, dude.
You too. Bye.
Oh, hey, sorry, I would have told Ben to stay. Yeah, you could happen for a few minutes if you want. I have like did I put a link? I think about I did put a link. But yes, feel free to jump on if you want to. I'll be here for like another 10 minutes. I hope those who are watching enjoyed the class. How many were watching? I don't know. Jacob told me I can't trust these numbers, so I don't know how many are watching. Do pop pop do 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 do. You coming, RJ? Hello, RJ. Look at that necklace. Look at that necklace.
Thank you. Oh yeah, just something I picked up.
It's like 17 bracelets like this. So see that on here.
Hey man, it's in. It's very in.
What's going on, man? How are you doing?
Good. Just traveling a little bit, visiting some family.
That's nice.
Checking out a potential new school, that kind of thing. Had
What
some
new
time
school?
to listen in today. I'm thinking about going to school out in Colorado. So potentially switching some graduate studies.
You just want the psychedelics that are now no longer illegal. So
No, dude,
so okay.
actually, like consumer behavior, that kind of thing.
I got you. Okay. Going with any friends?
Yep. I was visiting some friends, staying with a friend, visiting some family next up on the list.
No, but I'm saying in Colorado. I'm saying you have your boys in Colorado.
Yeah. A couple of friends from college have moved out here, and some
Nice.
friends from back home. So I'm actually going to go win at Magic the Gathering in just a little bit for those of us who know how to play a real card game with a
Gotcha.
lot of more tedious rules.
Yeah, I have a client of mine from Boulder. He goes on and on how amazing Colorado is.
Oh,
So,
it's beautiful. Would you like to see a little bit of a view?
sure.
Let's see here.
This would be for
I
graduate
can't see
school.
the phone. Yeah, this would be for graduate school. You know what? I'll just turn this around so you can just see. Maybe you can see some of the mountains out there.
No, right now I just see porches. Right now it just looks like any town, but I trust you.
So, yep.
You sent a comment. I was asking Ben about it as well, if he felt like the recaps were beneficial or not.
Yeah, I think they
even though
definitely
the
were.
AI lies, but generally speaking, it's doing a good job.
Yeah, I really liked how you guys covered the different, I guess, say types or typologies that the Rambam tends to cover, as well as definitely drawing out that he's going to say next chapter quite often, and it's important to find some of those through lines and track them through, which is not always easy. But I was wondering if you had any thoughts as far as the almost a parallel to the other three, or is it 3 or 4 children at the Seder table? It's 4 children. Thank you. I always tend not to consider the one that can't ask almost. And I that's something that pops up for me. I think there's certainly a lot to play with there. But it'll be interesting to see in the same way that gets discussed. We'll see these kind of different approaches.
Sometimes the one who can't ask is, I mean, there's been a comparison between the 4 who entered the mystical orchard, the Pardes, and then there's the 4 sons, right? So the wicked is like Elisha ben Avuya Acher that becomes a heretic, right? He wouldn't have been saved. He doesn't make it out. He doesn't survive spiritually. The wise man is Rabbi Akiva, who understands these things and comes out peacefully. Then there is the simple one, the Tam. So that's Ben Azai, who goes basically crazy, but like sort of like he's simple-minded, like we can't do anything with him. And then there's the one who can't ask, which is Ben Zoma, who dies, right? The one who can't ask is like sort of he doesn't even know where to start. So again, these are different modes. We all of us are, the 4 children are in all of us. And we have to be able to figure out, like, again, like how to place them all together.
I think in the same way that we could have that stubbornness in our own way, like that you guys discussed earlier in all of us as well. So definitely very excited. Sorry, I've tried very bad bandwidth down here. So
did you think the Game of Thrones example was okay?
A curveball to say the least. I do think it's fun as a way to draw out for people who are less familiar with the tradition that the way things are discussed is through some of these extremes. And It's not to say this is what we're supposed to be doing, even though that the principle is not quite the right term, I don't think. But I don't know, the given situation they're examining can be extreme. That doesn't mean that it's condoning that given situation. You shouldn't really take out single lines from any of those books and be like, okay, here they're saying to do this. It's like half the time they're saying to do the exact opposite.
Correct. I mean, this is very apropos with online, like anti-Semitism, anti-Semites, like quoting Talmud verses, which obviously is you can't, like, it's too dense to even rebuttal. You know what I mean? Like,
at least they're doing their homework.
But they're not. They're trying. It would be great if they were doing their homework. That would be great if they were doing their homework. another question, if you were listening, was the example I gave with the Librith. Did that follow through? I was wondering if that wasn't too confusing.
Sorry, which example again?
Of the Librith.
I may have missed that. Just the bandwidth here. I've been moving around a little bit. You want to reiterate it for me?
I was giving an example how basically like we're like the sort of the higher the moral hierarchy, like where does this kick in? And like one could challenge Rambam saying like, who are you to call us sort of sick? And then that sort of led to the conversation with like, morals versus desires. And I gave an example of Kierkegaard in Either Or, when he talks about like the morals versus like the aesthetics, and like how do you decide what's more important. And then I went into the example of the Librith and the Minotaur, really showing that like,
oh, right, yes.
So I wanted to make sure that
the maze and kind of not having a way out, as opposed to really looking at the the 5 books as forward looking, and that they push forward, as opposed to the Greek corpus, which is very self-contained and is pointing at things as more or less as if they're permanent and can't be changed. Not to say that isn't
Definitely
also pointed at in the 5 books, but there's certainly the pattern that's presented in the first book, and by mid numbers, because I'm not going to mispronounce things on stream if I can avoid it. You're definitely pushing through the wilderness, and there's a continuity amongst the different scenes and chapters and verses that is not there when you're looking at the different dramatic plays that have been preserved. For example, and that really plays out in the philosophies and the ideologies that have come down to us. When you take a look at some of the great writers and great thinkers of the last 200 years or so.
Exactly. I mean, ultimately, like, I mean, that's also what tragedy is, right? Which is like I was mentioning how like him flying too close to the sun, right? Or him trying to understand like the objective criteria for morality and not being able to do so is another. The tragedy is the despair of facing like an absolute truth, right? Like, and you only have human-made principles to try to deal with that. Like, then you don't know how to handle that ultimately. And I was stressing the idea that the wings are of his own making, right? So that's why, like, because it lacks like an objective foundation, he falls. Obviously, the contrast is in the Jewish approach, right? When the wings are gifted to us by God. I gave the example also in Prometheus, where like, it has to be stolen. And again, here in Judaism, it's gifted to us. It has to do with the co-creation. And specifically, like you said about the tragedy or the like faith, like your fate in the Greek stories is sort of sealed, right? Like it's a closed circuit. You can't escape. The Jewish prophets don't tell you that. They say like, you could change, right? Like this bad prophecy could happen unless you take agency over yourself, and then you could manifest a new destiny. That's very foreign to the Greek concept. Yafeh, I got you. What would you, I mean, we still have like probably like a few more months of Rambam, but ideally, what would you want to study if you could? You could select, if you could decide.
Oh man, there's really not much I would try to select apart. I think like when you're going through things for the first time, it's important to take it as it comes and to look forward through the text, and see how it builds upon itself, especially with people like the Rambam. That being said, as we go along, when there's important relationships or things being pointed out by Rambam, or important to understand about what was going on and how he might be handling a situation, that's always good to call out as well.
You mean like historically and from a context perspective, like what would make him say these things right now?
Exactly, but that also, like that being said, also the things that he says in the Hebrew that he doesn't say in the Arabic, for example. if we're going to be fair and in a relation of what his, I guess, spirit and thought were, I think that's fair to do. And it's also important to say, like, there is a time and context to say certain things and to be respectful of certain situations. It's no one's trying to pick a fight or say anybody's wrong or tell anybody how to live their lives. And I think we're trying to preserve respect for how things can be done. You have your way, I have mine to a certain degree. Even if Rambam is saying things should be X, things should be Y, it's like a sick body, that kind of stuff. So I think just remembering that he's from a different time and context, and as we review his language, it's not like we're the ones saying this is how it should be.
Also, and that's very true. And I mean, we mentioned this in earlier chapters where, like, we have a moral obligation to really Rambam says to sort of ask questions, challenge, and to get to a place where like even more rudimentary concepts of God get washed away from us. However, he also says, but that's not for the masses, or at least at the time, that's not for the masses. They should just listen to the rabbis and keep on with their more basic understanding, because he understands who he's dealing with, right? It's also in the context of, again, there's the political things going on with him being a doctor, with, for the authorities over there. There's him dealing with the different communities, such as in Yemen, and people are having serious questions with regards to resurrection. And so he has to be speaking in a certain way. I would think of, 1 second. Hey,
Perfect.
Kirk.
Just real quick, as a disclaimer, if my mic starts cutting out, I'm gonna have to leave. Right now, there's a hurricane, and I think the Wi-Fi is gonna stay on. And I don't think it's as bad that it's gonna take out the electricity, but I can't guarantee.
Well, I think you should stay safe.
I'm inside, so I'm fine. But I think just to make sure. But I think the electricity is fine.
Thank you. Well noted. And we missed you during class. And
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, good. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I was going to say that I was thinking after this with Ben to do the book of Kuzar, but he's doing that with someone else. Then, I mean, I could do it with other people, but I'm really focusing on sort of what Ben wanted to learn, but he's sort of open. So I don't know if the next thing will be Mesilat Yesharim, maybe he wants to do, which is the path of the righteous, or maybe we'll do Perek Helek of Maimonides, which is it's very cool. I mean, but a lot of more of the controversial discussions, or prophecy, resurrection, many other stuff that he talks about there. I don't know if Ben wants to do more of a deep dive onto prayer, specifically on Shema and Shemona Esrei, right? Hear, Israel, and the standing prayer, the silent prayer. So maybe he'll want to do a deep dive on that. I'm not sure. I don't know what he wants to do, but I've given him those options, so we'll see where we go from there.
I had a question for Kirk that was similar to Hezy's question for me. Kirk, you're a younger guy, right? I'm wondering if there's anything that you'd want to know more about.
About what?
Just anything. Yeah, let's go with anything.
No. I think he means in the context of Judaism. For example, to make it to ground it a little more. If you were picking the next subject we should learn in a few months from now, what would you want it to be?
I mean, in general, I'm generally interested in philosophy, so perhaps Jewish philosophy predominantly. But I mean, there is obviously different angles we could go. Like in terms of, am I most interested in, say, what is Jewish philosophy in terms of ethics versus Jewish metaphysics versus Jewish epistemology or whatever? It would be hard for me to still. I think there's a lot of things there, but in general, Jewish philosophy in relation to I guess you could say metaphysics or spirituality is probably most interesting to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I would argue that, ethics of our fathers, even Maimonides over here, these are all like Jewish, in a sense, Jewish philosophers talking about very similar things. The book of Kuzar definitely. The path of the righteous also fits the bill. The prayer thing is less relevant to that. But again, there's many, many things. I generally, again, like specifically also with the Noahides, I think it's important to also, not return to the basics, but like be introduced to the basics in a certain sense, and then build from there, right? Like if you want to start engaging with Aristotle again, I would say, learn through Maimonides what's his perspective on that, and then emerge from there to reassess your thoughts on Aristotle or other philosophers. But okay, thanks for sharing that. But I don't know if I hijacked your question though, RJ.
No, not at all. That's exactly the kind of thing I was looking for. I actually had a thought on the backside of that, which is, Chezi, what's your feeling on Spinoza from a Noahide perspective, in or out?
Is Spinoza in from a Noahide perspective?
Yeah.
It would depend. Out, actually.
Interesting. I want to learn more about that maybe another time.
I mean, ultimately, nature is God, right? So there's not even like Shituf over there, because he's not seeing the higher power behind it. And I would say the Christian, ultimately, even though there's an intermediary over there, the source is the same. And I think that is being denied in a certain sense by Spinoza, or at the very least, it's being articulated in such where it's sort of a void of meaning at that point.
Yeah. Well, I actually saw recently John Vervaeke has something about Spinoza and Einstein's God. Apparently, he's going to have some sort of lecture series. So, but yeah, there's a problem there when you deny the transcendent. I mean, I don't know much about Spinoza's philosophy other than the basic pantheism and rationalism. But I mean, if you're talking from a Jewish or any sort of traditional theological perspective, the idea that God is immanent is sort of necessarily out.
But we spoke about this in an earlier stream, but the philosophers, and specifically post-Plato, they came a very long way, which understanding the transcendent, right, and realizing that there is even, the unmoved mover. There's a God. However, that is a mute God. And in Judaism, we speak about, as we say in Hebrew, Baruch she'amar ve'haya olam. Blessed is he who spoke and created the world, right? We have a verbal, communicative God, right? So while the philosophers came a very long way, there's still ways to go. I mean, that was then. Today, obviously, with Islam and Christianity.
Well, out of curiosity, who's your favorite non-religiously Jewish philosopher? Like, who's your favorite non-religiously Jewish? So
non-religiously Jewish.
You could say secular or Christian philosophers, or
well, first of all, I guess my favorite philosopher is my grandfather.
Yeah, but he's an Orthodox Jew.
You're right. He's an Orthodox Jew. I understand. What about Levinas? Would he be considered? Or is he still too Jewish?
I mean, I guess you could say, but I mean, more. I mean, probably someone more like Heidegger or Spinoza.
Yeah. Okay.
Heidegger.
Really, I was gonna say let's say Eric Neumann, but that's not really. I mean, there's also philosophy, but
or I guess you could say Lacan. I'll include psychologists, so like Lacan or Freud or Jung.
Jacques Lacan. So yeah. So if you're including psychologists, then I would say, well, I was definitely formed by my father, and my father is like a diehard Freudian, but ultimately I would say Eric Neumann was very impactful on me.
I see.
It's just
how about you, RJ?
Oh man, my favorite. That was the question.
Yeah, non-religiously Jewish philosopher or psychologist.
Ideally anti-Semitic. We just really want
ideally anti-Semitic.
Okay, there's no bias.
Okay, well, if it's ideally anti-Semitic, then Heidegger's back. But
No.
like, hey
Herman
man,
Cohen.
I can point out things about grammar in different languages too. Anyway, what's my favorite? I guess maybe Kierkegaard.
Kierkegaard, that's a good choice.
If we're gonna narrow it down to like who's in what group and stuff, but it yeah, I'll go with Kierkegaard for the time being.
Well,
Maybe
so
even Camus. I mean, it's tough to say.
the
Camus
thing
good,
about
but sad.
Kierkegaard is that there's something more individualistic about Kierkegaard than say Heidegger. Like there's something more there's something more poetic, I could say. Um like cuz I don't know, it's sort of a romantic feeling. But I mean, and Camus, to be honest, I mean, he's a philosopher, but a lot of it's more literary, and I think he's not as systematic of a philosopher as the other philosophers. There's a lot more poetic language, but I wouldn't say it's
I would put him on the. I only put him on my favorites list because I just appreciate Lachute, the Fall, from like just how he wrote it and what he's getting across, and just very good.
well,
And
believe it or
for an absurdist existentialist, he wound up being very optimistic and pro-life, which is interesting. And I don't mean like in the political sense. I mean he just very much embraced and thought living was a good thing.
Kirk,
what was this?
who you started 11th grade now?
Yeah, but like I said, hurricane.
I understand the hurricane, but I mean the second. But like you started September 1st. But my question more is, who are you chilling with any one of your friends in school? Like, do you guys talk about this in recess?
Yeah. Well, not. I don't usually talk to them about philosophy. I usually talk to my friends about like music or the weather. I usually talk about more casual stuff, unless they're an adult friend or something like that on the weekends. But no, I don't usually talk to the friends I have that are my age about
Have
philosophy.
you
It's not.
identified?
It's not that they're not smart. I don't want to demean them. It's just two different wavelengths of interest.
Right. So I mean that I would say that's probably the common case with most kids your age. But have you identified anyone that you could talk to these things about, or at the very least, have you found a
Well,
teacher that you could discuss these things with?
I know some who I probably could, but like the thing is, I just don't want to like get in anybody's face about something I don't want to talk about. So like I usually don't approach strangers unless I've already seen them sitting, say, on a lunch table for like several times, and I know them generally, right? Does that make
Hmm.
sense? If I am familiar with somebody's personality, eventually I might want to prompt, but I just am not very confrontational, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Perhaps it's a character flaw.
What do you do for fun, Kirk?
So sometimes I do chess, sometimes I'm starting to go to the gym to go swimming. Uh, at around noon. Um, so I like swimming. I don't really like other forms of exercise other than swimming. It'd probably be better if I started lifting weights, but that's not really what I'm doing right now.
What you missed, McMo, is what you missed is speaking about Either Or by Kierkegaard. So that's what you missed. And we were waiting for you. We wanted you to be here.
Wait,
Come in.
McMo?
Yeah, but he's gone. I mean, he's still here. He's not gone. But Kirk, I got that. Okay. Do you ever talk to your parents about things like this, or this is not their jam?
No, I mean, my dad's a literature teacher, so like if I say, hey, oh, what do you think about Kurt Vonnegut or Shakespeare or Edgar Allan Poe? Well, that's like poetry, but like, would I consider that philosophy? Not really.
I understand that, but I'm saying, do you and your dad like? I'm saying, does he play with you? Does he have these discussions with you? Like, if would you go to your dad and be like, "Hey, Dad, I'm struggling with this philosophical concept. Can you tease it out with me?" Or like, that's not the
No,
conversation.
not this specific subject.
Gotcha. Okay. I hope these questions are all right. Just
It's okay. No, I mean, if I have people I want, but the people I want are adult friends in my life, and not my family.
I got you.
I mean, unless you're saying I should start prompting a discussion of philosophy.
No. I mean, you clearly like it. So I'm wondering if like, I'm wondering if this is your only outlet to discuss these things, and if it is,
No, it's not. This is not the only outlet. I'm just saying it's one of the outlets. It's just the other outlets aren't my parents.
Gotcha.
But I mean, growing up, I assume your dad probably talked to you about some of these stuff because he was a psychologist, or.
Yes, my dad specifically was very adamant about a lot of these stuff. We lived in a very, very small apartment. There was 8 of us in let's say 900 square feet, basically. So it was tight, but we had this.
Was this in New York?
No, I was born and raised here. This was in Jerusalem. And we had this tiny room in this tiny house, which was my dad's office, but it was also called the thinking room. And in the thinking room, you had to, hey, McMo,
Hey, y'all. How's it going?
In the thinking room, before you went out to play or do things like recreational things, you had to spend an hour in the thinking room. You either had to write a book, write a poem, write a story, read a book. You had to do something and then discuss with my father. If your friends come over to play and you're telling them like, I can't come and play because I'm reading Dante's Inferno, it's not so fun as a child. I guess now I'm appreciative of it, but then it was quite intense.
Wait. Was it really Dante, or is that just it happened to be Dante as you're picking
I
your
just
brain?
threw Dante. Did I? I mean, I've read it in I've read the Divine Comedy in my parents' house. It was there. I don't know I can't remember exactly if that was one of the things I did in the thinking room, but it was intense. But again, I'm happy for it. Also,
Well,
I mean, like, yes.
Out of curiosity, have you studied any of the post-structuralists? Like, you know who Julia Kristeva is?
No.
Okay, well, so but I mean, are you familiar with the other post-structuralists? Like, well, I don't think Lacan was post-structuralist, or postmodernists like Foucault or Derrida or Lacan.
Yes, I mean Jacques Lacan was that was a very prominent name. I mean, my dad was wrestling with Jacques Lacan. I just remember like my dad sometimes like walking out of the room.
I might have to rejoin. I can't hear anybody.
Oh,
I gotcha. Actually, and I feel bad for McMo. I actually need a bus to move. I've been here a little longer than I said. None of you guys have control over this stream, unfortunately. So I would have left you guys here to play. But Daddy's got a boogie. So, McMo, if you're still
certainly
here,
pick it up next time.
Yes, we'll pick it up next time. Next week, we start with chapter 4. Upwards and onwards. Take care. And
I'm not going to be here next Wednesday, but I'll try and be here tomorrow at Thursday. You said it's at 4:30 something.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. And also make sure you have some plan to deal with the political situation, because
you got it, buddy.
Everyone's looking at you guys now.
I'll make some calls. We'll see what I could do.
Okay, peace.
We'll talk, Kirk. McMo, the party's over.
This thing down?
I'm shutting it down, but I want to be gracious. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I just got off. Well, I'm technically still on at work, but I got back to my hotel. I got to enter in all of the people I talked to today and that kind of thing. So,
successful day?
Yeah. I'd give it a B+. I wasn't kind of doing the things I like doing the most, but wasn't doing my least favorite things either. So,
how long have you been in this gig?
Coming up on 3 years, I believe. Feels like I'm still kind of in my first year in a lot of ways, but yeah, it stretches me a lot. Kind of have to be less artistic, more by the books. It's kind of interesting. I mean, I could put it in probably an either or frame.
Sure.
but it's it very much is I still struggle to sacrifice my aesthetic whims, we'll say. The life of the aesthetic man is still, calling at all times. So doing what I don't want to do, is kind of the name of the game in a lot of ways. But then also I'm very blessed. Like I'm not bad at my job. I'm just, I just don't like it that much. So, but
that's the relevant question for today, right? As far as Kierkegaard goes, like, do we prioritize our personal freedoms, or do we, adhere to like an established moral framework? And
man, I wish I could have been here earlier. I have lots of thoughts on either or, but man, yeah.
Do you feel like this current job current like 3 years is this it, or like in like another year it's time to say Shabbat Shalom and find that new thing?
Well, Lord willing, this is not what I do for the rest of my life. That being said, I may be making more money now than I am for the rest of my life. In some ways, probably not, but it's a possibility. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of golden handcuffs. It's a very, cushy job in a lot of ways. And especially for someone like me who doesn't have a college degree, it's a lot of money for someone without a college degree who's not into trades. Basically.
I've never used my college degree. I studied law. I worked as a lawyer. I mean, like, I never studied. I did that, but like, I do nothing with that right now. So like,
yeah. Well, that's the type of degree that kind of just opens doors for you. Like a law degree is pretty, as degrees go, that one seems like one of the better ones.
So yes. And like, it also opened, doors for me when I was involved. Let's say this was like 13 years ago, like in politics.
Yep.
But I say in Hebrew it's called sheker. It's the world of lies. Nothingness over there.
Yep.
And also you said a golden handcuff could also be a fantastic opportunity, right? God allowing you to create a reality where you and your wife, please God, your children could have a comfortable, and more than that, maybe by sacrificing, it allows you to allow your son or daughter to manifest their dream, which was, the ideal dream you wanted. And some of your traits that you wish you could articulate and manifest could potentially be manifest through this child.
That's
One
true.
has to be very careful not to push that onto the child, but
yeah, that's an interesting thought. I think I don't normally consider that because I'm so different than both of my parents, and even the life I wanted as a child was so different than the life that they thought that I would want, but yeah, so obviously, Kierkegaardian individualist spirit going on, but that's a good thought, just even sacrifice for the future children, Lord willing. And but yeah, I do want to let you go, but also I want to put something on your plate to see if this meshes with what was said earlier, which
Sure.
is, I get the sense from reading all of Kierkegaard, and especially seeing Either Or as like one of his first kind of works, that you could kind of, and they often are put together, as one book, Either Or, but that you could almost title the book Neither, at least from Kierkegaard's perspective.
That's
because I think, yeah, and some of this is because the first one I read was Fear and Trembling. So
I think that's everyone's first Kierkegaard, or like in our generation, that's everyone's first Kierkegaard.
Right. Yeah, you're probably right. But I get the sense
from a Christian or a Jewish perspective, they got to bring you into Abraham, right? The white knight.
Exactly. Yeah, you gotta wrestle with Abraham. Yeah, that's where Jacob is. Jacob is in the wrestling that went on between Abraham and Isaac, kind of a thing. But yeah, I almost get the sense that Kierkegaard's saying like that the aesthetic stage is obviously wrong. You can tell how evil it is by the way it is. At least from a religious perspective. but then I think that a lot of people fail to see how Kierkegaard may be, he may be using irony and humor and satire a little bit with, what's the guy's name? Judge something. The writer of the second book, the pseudonymous writer or whatever. Because yeah, there's a sense in which like this guy puts like his family over God, and that like towards the end of the book, it almost seems like he's struggling to tell the difference between God and his family in a way. It's like there's a weird kind of
God, the family, and the crowd, right?
Yeah. And so yeah, I get the sense, and it's been a while since I read the end that last part of Either Or, just because the first part's so fun and interesting, and then you get into the part and I'm like, okay, yeah, I know, kind of a thing. But yeah, that towards the end, and I can't remember the exact section, but yeah, there is a sense in like in it that, and that's why for me the religious stage has to be talked about in a conversation of Either Or, because I think Kierkegaard's religious stage in a sense is like the answer to Either Or, in a way, like that is the answer that he's wanting you to draw, is that like it's not just the hedonism and the like following my every whim, nor is it the kind of like complete obliteration, self-sacrifice for the good of the community. That the religious stage or phase or sphere or whatever, you actually get both, right? Like you sacrifice Isaac and you receive him, like in fear and trembling. But
this is what I'm hearing from you. It's also alluding to his whole idea of anxiety and angst, right? Like of how people can't really handle that tension. That's why in many ways he's still very relevant sort of for today, right? You have like climate angst and like election angst, and like it's ramped up to a completely different level. It's sort of interesting where like these like rock stars were like walking around, and like today, like where are these people?
Here we are, brother.
Here we are. Exactly. And 1,000 years from now, they were known to jest when they were speaking to each other, and they would normally talk from houses or cars, right? They're very
right. Yeah.
Another random question or personal question on the genie, right? You get to call the shots. Dream job. What do you do?
Yeah, I'm an artist. That's basically it. Starving artist would have suited me perfect, except that I'd made the decision to get married. And,
no, but artist. So talk to me. Like, what's your Sistine Chapel? Like, what are you like? Well, if you could do it all, like, what is it that you'd want to do?
I would basically do what I do whenever I have any free time, which is
Pornhub.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bingo. I'm a Pornhub artist, actually.
Exactly. So man arrested.
No, it's I make music. So I love recording music. I love writing music. But I see it very much as a act of prayer and an act of worship. And so
taking different
notes,
really putting them together and putting them into beautiful creation.
Yeah, absolutely. And too, I incorporate a lot of the stuff that people talk about when they talk about communing with the muses, the kind of weird, you will appreciate my you all probably also have felt the kind of weird like polytheism or like heathenism that's like, I don't know, I get creeped out sometimes when people talk about the Greek gods and the whole Peugeot thing of like they're all real, they're just demons or whatever. I'm like, no, I worship the one true God and his son Jesus Christ, kind of a thing. So yeah, it's a very spiritual thing for me, but even that kind of spark of creativity, I've always seen that as a gift from God. So yeah, so that would probably be what I do. Back in the day when I got fired from the mega church, I luckily still had a couple of like counseling sessions booked up, and when they actually set me up with like a professional coach or something. And so I did this whole like worksheet or whatever. It was not the right time in my life to do that, just because I was so, broken at the time. It's just slightly before I met Kierkegaard. But yeah, so and I had to do a similar kind of what would it be, like a mental experiment, which was, yeah, like the dream job or whatever. And at the time, it's interesting. I knew I wanted to do something creative. I wanted it to be collaborative with other people. But I think the big difference now is I would probably be just as fine to just do it all by myself. To just kind of like be a night of pure resignation.
I mean, music is. The prophets needed to use music to. The sons of the prophets had to use music as a catalyst for prophecy. So I think it's a very spiritual place to be, and that could be in all different kind of music. They speak about how when Messiah comes, there'll be an eighth note, and whatever that means. I can tell you as a Levite, so I have an in to the temple. When your music's ready, come to me, work it out. I'll go to the high priest. I'm like, hey, slow your horses. It's a good track. Yes, there's some swear words, but we know God likes Jay-Z. He's gonna like this.
Yeah. There's very few swear words in my music, actually. I probably curse more on live streams than I do in my music. But I don't know. I make I consider myself an absurdist Christian, and so my music is very absurd. But I think it's still, as much as music can be Christian, I think it is, or religious for that matter. Like I do consider it religious music, but it's just, it's so niche and weird that I hesitate to,
music is niche and weird.
Yeah. You can look me up on streaming services.
Oh, you mean your music? I'm like, you're saying music in general is niche in the world. I'm like, I don't know. People are pretty into
it. Yeah. No, the most universal thing in the world. Yeah.
Taking a concert once.
Oh man, I kind of wish I had said that.
Every time you introduce yourself to people, like, not a lot of people know about it. It's called music. No, it's like...
Yeah. I'm not sure if you're familiar with music.
I wish. All my siblings always we always ask my parents, like, why did you not make us, learn an instrument? Like, what was the deal? You guys are like, it's like so classic for you guys to have done that. So I don't know why
that would have been. Yeah, if you're getting punished by having to have like thinking time, like that's classic, like violin, piano, something. Yeah, wow.
So that always bothered me. I wish I could like play. I like to sing, but I wish I could play like my own music, but not even my own music.
I think singing is the best music. I think that there's a reason that it's the music we make with our breath, right? Like some might draw allusions to the original, breath of the Lord into Adam. That there's something special about music, but then there's something even more special about singing. So you've got the best portion still, is what I'm saying.
Again, music and singing, it's because it's an act of creation ultimately, right? Yeah. At the end of the day, like that's what you're participating in. And like you talk about the muses, that's because you're playing your little mini God for that moment, right? Like and
I'm most in His image, maybe. Exactly. Mini little God sounds a little, well, I can't go all the way on that metaphor, but yes.
You're exactly. You're the closest to being in His image, and that comes with a lot of responsibility, though. I have I mentioned this once in the stream, but there's like this one example of it, but Christian music could be extremely, extremely powerful. Like my son always complains. He's like, "Is this song about Hashem? Like about God?" I'm like, "Yes." This song. He's like, "What?" He's like, "Why don't they sing like this in synagogue?" I was like, "Yeah, that's not gonna happen." But like, there's something about it that's very.
Would they? You could tell me this. Modest Yahoo, in my opinion, is a great artist.
Yeah, sure.
But I still couldn't see a world where they're like, plugging in the Modest Yahoo at the synagogue.
I mean, that's very Jewish music. And first of all, it's synagogue, no, just because it's like these are the prayers and these are the prayers and these are the tunes. They change over time. I mean, many Orthodox Jews are not even aware that like one of we have a beautiful prayer of the soul, which is allegedly, or there are some sources that say the source is Peter actually, and it was brought in.
Wow.
I've also heard that in the Catholic Church, some of the most ancient chants were actually post the destruction of the Second Temple and the growth of Christianity. Some of the Levites and priests that were still around were forced to come and teach some of these tunes, and they're still there within the church, which I also thought is
well, and it wouldn't surprise me too. Like I've had friends who have talked about this before, but like especially as it pertains to music copyright laws, which is a whole thing in and of itself. But there aren't that many notes. Of course, there's infinite notes, right? But in order to make a song, we're all kind of sharing. It's just like for when you make a food, there's only like when you make a dish. You usually have some sort of grain, some sort of meat, some sort of veggies, maybe some fruit. You've got spices and, but like it's always kind of a recombination of the same ingredients in a way. Maybe Italian food is the best example of that.
Is that true? Aren't there innovations in music though? Like, I'm saying, aren't people like breaking the rules, playing with the reverb, doing like you can't do that. You can't skip from the third to the fifth, but suddenly someone does it. And like, this is a whole new.
Yeah, so the history of music is basically like a taking up of seemingly arbitrary rules that are kind of codified as taste, or maybe the taste comes first and then it's codified, and then some new radical comes and blows it open. But what I mean to say is that like, especially with those older songs, a lot of those is just like, it's just kind of like modal music, and it has so much to do with perception and like the way that the mathematics of frequency works, and so those kind of portions or ratios are kind of timeless, and it's like math. It's just like math. So the question of like, did we invent them or discover them is certainly plausible, but all that leads to me like having a theory or a question of like, yeah, I bet that like cavemen were singing, at some point, some caveman hummed the tune of like, "We Will Rock You," and has no clue that depending on how old you think the Earth is, like thousands of years later, now stadiums, like more people than this guy has seen in his whole life, are shouting the same melody.
I'll challenge that by positing this idea, and then I gotta go, but. The Israelites get the Ark of the Covenant back. David is like breakdancing. He's doing this thing. He's like, we got the Ark. What's up? Selfies. Sending it to everyone. The problem is, this is before the temple, right? He's like, what? Okay, so what do I do with this right now? I got it back. So I'm going to put it in the tent next to my tent. I have a big deal tent. It's next to me. But he's still feeling awkward. He's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know that caveman song. So he goes to the Levites and tells them, sing a new song, like something new. I need something that hasn't, like, we need to interact with this thing, and we need to do something. It's not enough. I don't have a house yet, and we'll find out later that I can't even build a house. And I danced in front of this thing when it came inside. But now that it's here, there needs to be something that happens. So I would argue that there's points in history where a new song is needed. And like,
yes.
The world is not ready to respond to that yet, but someone comes and says like, I and obviously we'll believe like, like the Levites through divine inspiration managed to, put a tune together, which was like, David's like, that's what I'm talking about. And like, exactly. that felt to him as real, as a response that needed to happen. And he didn't say, let's gather the Israelites to walk around this, or let's gather the Israelites to give money for this. It was like, no, I need something else. I need something that's going to resemble, and you could look at the 12 lost tribes. I need something that's going to take abstract and bring it together.
Right.
So
Yeah, well, and I don't mean to take away from that at all, because I'm a huge proponent of sing a new song. Um, but yeah, and another way to say that is like there's only one hallelujah chorus. I don't think that they're going to improve on that in heaven or anything like that. The new kingdom. Yeah, like when Messiah comes back, I don't think it comes for the first time. Whatever. Um, uh, I don't think that he's going to make too many improvements to joyful, joyful, we adore. Like it kind of is what it is. It's like it is.
I mean,
There it is.
So is that this is silly because the word is actually mistaken, but putting that aside, like, the song Gyra?
I know. Probably. Yeah, probably.
Okay, so I mean, in Hebrew, it just means he'll see, but I understand that that train has left the station already. But
Right.
I don't know. Like there is. I mean, even the way the voice itself has developed, I think there are innovations there, and I'm with you. Like, okay, we know now, I think, that if you're playing a certain frequency and you put like water on it or sand on it, it will actually create like a geometric shape.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? Right. So
Oh yeah.
we know that
Cymatics.
now. You could argue like they knew that then. Sure, who knows what the Egyptians were doing with their sounds and their stuff, and they're moving their pyramids, but arguably there's like a whole nother medium that you could add on to this, right? So like the visuals and the music, and then visuals, music, the right aroma, right? So these things stack over each other, and you really to give you like a full sensory experience. I'm sure it's pretty crazy.
Hezi,
Yeah, I
you
mean-
asked me earlier about if there was anything that might be good to go over, and I definitely mistook the question. But I think this is a great topic. Looking at some of the different songs, and Micha Mocha, of course, Song of Songs, of course, those kinds of things, but maybe looking at them as songs. And then separately, I think there's something to be said towards understanding the cantillations and the markings, and towards Hebrew study, understanding how those come about, what they mean, towards I mean, my favorite thing is the niguns, that have been passed down from generation to generation. But I think if I could pick only one thing, it would be the Shema, but especially the stories about how different communities finding each other through recitation of the Shema. We know that you are Jewish if you know how to say this, and we also tend to say it a very specific way.
So the famous story of that is after the Holocaust, many parents gave the church or Christian neighbors their children to keep them safe, and the church, first of all, obviously they saved the kids, so that's beautiful. Some churches decided to be like, well, now we have this kid, he's going to be like a Christian kid, basically.
Let's
After
get
a
him
few years,
saved.
right, exactly. Let's get him saved. After the war, a famous rabbi went to all these different communities looking for the lost children, and he would walk into rooms and he would start singing the Shema, and kids would like either start crying or be like, I know that song, or like, I remember that song, or they would just respond back. It's very chilling
That's
to
beautiful.
think about. There's a song, I don't know if you know this song, RJ. There's a song called Shema Yisrael by Shweki that it tells that whole story. It's in English. Beautiful song.
I don't know that one.
There's also a very
It makes
haunting.
me, and I know you're trying to leave. But one of the places in scripture that I've always kind of wished that I could time travel back to is the Israelites marching around Jericho, and that trumpet blast. That's like that had to be like an all-time moment, like an all-time. What did that sound like?
Definitely.
Oh,
No.
if you want to know what it sounds like, you can wait a few weeks because we're going to blow them quite soon.
Yeah,
but I
here
just
you're
mean-
talking about like in unison. I mean, everyone's on a high. Everyone's circling around.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What it sounded like when the people of Israel believed that it would make walls crumble, and the walls crumbled. Like that's
Right.
It's not just I know what a shofar sounds like. I can imagine what
I'm right there with you.
Well, a shofar, by the way, unlike the trumpet that's like in the synagogue, I mean, in the temple, the shofar is supposed to sound, in Hebrew, it's called a yevava. It's supposed to sound like a woman's cry. Like it's supposed to sound like an uncontrollable weep. So you have that, like, doo-woo, doo-woo, doo-woo. That sound is supposed to be like someone begging.
Sounds just like my wife.
You should tell her that when she starts talking, be like, you know where you'd be great? In a synagogue on the Day of Atonement.
Yeah, she's calling me to worship.
Well, gentlemen,
Guys,
before we have to
thanks,
do
Hezi.
Malchates for keeping Hezi too long, I just want to say thank you so much for having us on, and looking forward to the next one.
Of course. Have
Yep.
a blessed day and take care.
Right back at you. Bye, y'all.
Bye. What nice gentleman. Yeah, I'm coming.